The noon sun lay across the plains like a slow-burning brand, gilding the dust and bleaching the air until the horizon seemed to tremble. Elias Boone stood in the doorway of his cabin, his palms still warm from the handle of the coffee pot he'd set down moments earlier. Beyond the porch, the land was a wide, unbroken quilt of pale grass and low cottonwoods, each leaf stirring in a wind that never reached his skin. It was the sort of stillness that came before trouble, a hush that told the body to listen even when the mind was unwilling. She was there, Noka, the Apache widow he had cut down from the noose just the day before. Her black hair fell in loose strands around her face, still streaked with the dust of yesterday's gallows, and her dark eyes were fixed on him with the unblinking patience of someone who had survived worse than stares. Beside her stood two identical girls, perhaps 9 years old, their small shoulders squared as though they were trying to match the world's weight. Each wore her hair in a braid tied with a strip of faded red cloth, and both held between them a small buckskin pouch. It sagged with some heavy shape inside, the leather stiff and darkened by a stain Elias could not mistake for anything but blood. He stepped down slowly, the boards groaning under his boots. "You walked from town?" he asked, though the question was foolish. Their clothes told the story, the hem of Nokoa's skirt gritted with dust, the girl's bare ankles scuffed raw. She nodded once, the motion small but deliberate, then offered the pouch forward without explanation. From the road, two riders passed at a slow trot. One, a man Elias knew by sight from the mercantile, kept his eyes fixed on the widow, his lips curled in contempt. The other spat into the dirt, never looking at Elias but making certain the sound carried. The twins' heads lowered, not in shame for themselves, but for him. He took the pouch but did not open it, his thumb running along the seam of the drawstring. "Water first," he said, and gestured toward the trough by the porch. The girls moved without a word, cupping their hands, drinking until their faces shone with it. Noka waited until they were done before bending to drink herself, her movements careful, almost ceremonial. Inside the cabin, the air was cooler, carrying the faint scent of pine resin from the firewood stacked near the hearth. Elias poured 3 tin cups of water and set out bread and cured venison on the table. The girls sat side by side, their knees brushing, eating in quiet bites, eyes flicking to their mother as if she might vanish if they looked away too long. Noka remained standing until Elias motioned for her to sit, the old oak chair creaking under her slight weight. When the edge of their hunger had been dulled, she laid the pouch on the table between them. Elias untied the cord, the leather yielding with a faint stickiness, and tipped the contents into his palm. A brooch, heavy, gold, inlaid with turquoise, winked up at him, its edges rimmed with something darker than tarnish. The design stirred a recognition he did not welcome. Years ago, he'd seen that very piece pinned to the lapel of Henry Calhoun, the town banker, a man whose smile was thin as barbed wire. Nokoa's voice was low, even. "It belonged to my husband." She paused, her gaze fixed on the brooch. "They told the girls to give it to the man who had the courage to stand beside me." Elias's jaw tightened. "Who's they?" Her eyes lifted to his, steady but shadowed. "Men who know you now have a reason to fear you." Before he could speak, the sound of hooves broke the stillness. Through the open window, dust rose from the road as a rider slowed near the cabin. The man sat there, watching. Then, as if marking the place in his memory, he turned back toward town. Elias knew the story would grow teeth by sundown. Noka leaned forward. "Yesterday, I told you my husband died in a raid." Her hand closed over the brooch. "That was not true. He was shot in the back. 3 men. One dropped this when they fled. One was Calhoun." Elias felt a cold weight settle in his chest. His father had once worked for Calhoun as a guard, before drink took his strength and his name. The memory of that service sat uneasily beside the truth in Nokoa's voice. The girls watched silently, their small fingers tracing shapes on the table's worn surface. Outside, the light shifted, the wind turning warm. The crunch of many hooves approached this time. Elias stepped onto the porch as 4 riders came into view, Calhoun at their head. The banker reined in, his coat immaculate, his mustache neat as his accounts. "That brooch," Calhoun called, his voice loud enough for the open windows to carry it inside. "It's mine. Stolen from my home years ago. I'm here to take it back." Elias didn't answer, only looked past him to the men flanking his sides, faces he recognized from the saloon, men who laughed with their hands on the grips of their revolvers. "You've been making poor choices, Boone," Calhoun continued, his tone almost friendly. "Sheltering a criminal. Now you're in possession of stolen property. I'd like to resolve this without the sheriff." Elias stepped back inside, picked up the brooch, and set it in front of Noka. "Yours to decide," he said. She didn't hesitate. She drew the pouch closed and slipped it into the folds of her skirt. A muscle in Calhoun's jaw ticked. "You keep that, Boone, and you'll find yourself without supplies, without credit. Winter's coming, and it'll come harder for you than for most." Elias stepped down from the porch until he stood just a few feet from Calhoun's stirrup. "If anyone comes near her or the girls," he said quietly, "they won't leave standing." Behind Calhoun, a few townsfolk had gathered at a distance, drawn by the scent of conflict. Calhoun saw them, saw the way they watched, and the calculation crossed his face like a shadow. He gave a tight smile, turned his horse, and rode off without another word, his men following. The silence after their departure was heavy. The girls shifted uneasily until Noka touched their shoulders, grounding them. Then one of the twins stepped forward, reaching into the bodice of her dress to pull out a folded scrap of paper. She handed it to Elias. Inside was a crude map, drawn in charcoal, an X marking a spot near the old trading post, and 3 initials scrawled in a child's hand, the same initials Noka had spoken moments before. "Our father told us to give this," the girl said, "to the man who stood up for our mother." Elias looked at the map, then at Noka, whose gaze held the weight of both defiance and fear. The knowledge settled between them. The brooch was not the reward, it was the bait. He folded the paper, tucking it into his pocket. Outside, the horizon was burning gold with the setting sun. "You'll be safe here tonight," he said, glancing at the girls. "Tomorrow we ride." Noka studied him, something unspoken passing between them, the first thread of trust laid down. As he turned back toward the corral, the narrator's voice, older now, speaking from some distance in time, slipped into the moment like the wind through grass. "Sometimes the prize for doing right is not thanks or gold, but the burden of a road you did not choose. And when that road appears, you take it, for the sake of those who cannot walk it alone." The last light bled out across the plains, and the night began to gather. The story was not finished, only opened. Which city are you watching our short video from? Please leave a comment. Please subscribe to the channel as well. Thank you.